Hello and welcome to another standard video here in the preview event for Avatar: The Last Airbender, where I got a chance to preview the new set a few days before release, and today we're checking out this pretty sweet 4-color ally deck. Glad to see allies returning, now no longer limited to Zendikar, and yeah, the Avatar set is chock full of allies, and the entire main deck outside of the lands features new cards, including Katara the Fearless, a 3-mana 3/3, saying if a triggered ability of an ally we control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time, so kind of like a Panharmonicon or Roaming Throne for the archetype, which is great. Then we've got a Great Divide Guide, a 2/3, saying each land and ally we control can now tap to make a mana of any color, so it turns all our creatures into mana elves essentially, as well as giving us perfect mana, which is welcome in essentially a 4-color deck. Can even make it a 5-color deck if you want to splash some black cards, so we have that option as well. And this will give us a nice mana boost, especially good when we're going wide with cards like the Invasion Reinforcements, which is essentially like Resolute Reinforcements, except the creatures are now allies as well, so it's even better in this archetype. And making 2 creatures with 1 card is also very good at enabling the South Pole Voyager, which is a 2/2, saying whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, we gain 1 life. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, we also now get to draw a card. So with a single reinforcements, we can gain 2 life and draw a card for every Voyager on the battlefield. And the Voyager, of course, also very good alongside Katara, gaining us even more life. And if we go turn 2 Voyager, turn 3 Katara, we immediately get to gain 2 life and draw a card. So those also curve very nicely into each other. And then our finisher of choice in this build is going to be the Earth King's Lieutenant, a 1/1 Trampler. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other ally creature you control. So this can massively enhance our team, especially if we control Katara, to double the number of +1/+1 counters essentially. And then whenever another ally enters afterwards, we can put a +1 counter on the Lieutenant himself. And then to make sure we have a little bit of interaction, we also have 3 copies of Aang Swift Savior, a 2/3 with flash and flying, and Aang introduces both airbending and waterbending. When Aang enters, we get to airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell, so we can essentially exile an opposing or even our own permanent, where the controller of that spell can now cast it for 2 mana, so it's a little weird. But yeah, it's very effective at essentially tempoing someone out if our opponent tries to cast some 4 or 5 mana spell. Now we get to flash an Aang, delay it by a turn, and our opponent still has to repay 2 mana to cast that spell. And we can also use this to bounce a creature, or especially good at bouncing tokens, since those will be exiled for good. And then Aang can also waterbend for 8 mana, meaning we can pay mana for it, or we can tap either artifacts and or creatures to help pay for the waterbend cost. So it's kind of like a mix of Convoke and Improvise. And then if we pay that 8 mana, we get to transform Aang into the Ocean's Fury, have 5/5 with Reach and Trample, and when it attacks, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature we control. Not super likely to come up, but it's nice to have the option. And then another great source of card advantage in this archetype is Hakoda, Selfless Commander, a 3/5 with Vigilance, saying we can look at the top card of our library at any time and cast allies from the top of our library as well. We can even sacrifice Hakoda, and then creatures we control get +0/+5 and indestructible until end of turn, so it can also save the team from a board wipe that would otherwise destroy everyone else. Then the reason to dip into red is for the Wartime Protesters, a 4/4 with haste, saying whenever another ally we control enters, we can put a +1 counter on it, and it also gains haste until end of turn, so that can be a nice way to maybe recover from a board wipe, or to immediately pressure the opponent. Also very good with the Great Divide Guide, since now every creature that enters can also immediately tap for mana, so if you combine that with a card draw from a Voyager, or maybe being able to play allies off the top with Hakoda, and all of a sudden we can quickly overwhelm our opponent. And then rounding out the deck, I also have 1 Aang at the Crossroads as a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. When it enters, we get to look at the top 5 cards of our library, put a creature with mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield. so that can also maybe hit some of our more exciting 4-drops. And then whenever another creature we control leaves the battlefield, we can transform Aang into the Destined Savior, a 4/4 flyer, saying land creatures we control have vigilance, and at the beginning of combat on our turn we get to Earthbend 2, so that's another new mechanic where we can now essentially animate one of our lands into a 2/2 creature by putting 2+1 counters on it. If that land were to die or get exiled, we still get to return it back to the battlefield tapped, so we don't lose out on our land. And we can Earthbend with the Earthen Ally as well. This 1 mana 0/2 gets 1 additional power for each color among allies we control. So by default it's a 1/2, but in this deck it can easily go up to a 3/2, even a 4/2 if we find our red ally. And then for a total of 7 mana, we can Earthbend 5, so we can now turn a land into a 5/5 creature, so that can also be a decent way to cross the finish line in grindier matchups. And of course we can count on the Great Divide Guide to fix our colors, so we can activate this ability in the first place. And finally there's the Earth Kingdom Protectors, kind of like a selfless savior for allies. A 1/1 also has vigilance, and we can sacrifice it at any point to give another ally we control indestructible until end of turn. So very useful in protecting some of our key creatures like Katara and maybe Hakoda to help take over the game. And then the mana base also picked up a new land with a Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop, which can make a mana of any color to cast our ally spells, can even pay 5 mana, tap it, and make a 1/1 ally creature token. So this alongside Cavern of Souls to make our allies uncounterable, Secluded Courtyard to cast all our ally spells, and then Multiversal Passage, which can also fix our colors, ensures that we can pretty easily support all these additional colors. Otherwise, we're mostly a green-white deck, which is why we have 2 of each of those basics. And then a few cards in the sideboard worth discussing if you're maybe considering playing this in best of 3, or if you want to adjust the deck for certain metagames. We have May as a card that's in black that's also maybe worth splashing for, can make our Earthen Ally up to a 5-powered creature for 1 mana, and then a 2/2 First Strike, saying whenever a player casts a non-creature spell they lose 2 life, so this can be very effective against opposing control decks and decks with a lot of non-creature spells in general, and this is only going to be affecting the opponent since our deck is all creatures. Then another black card worth splashing. If graveyard decks start becoming popular again, then we might want to include a few copies of the Rioter, which can tap an untapped ally creature we control to exile target card from a graveyard. Also has firebending, so if this attacks we get to add a red mana, although it's going to go away at the end of combat, so it's not super useful in this deck, unless we can maybe flash in some creatures. Then we also have the Earth Kingdom Jailer, which could give us some more removal for opposing permanents that resolved, as long as their mana value is 3 or greater. So it's somewhat situational, but in the right circumstances it can be a very effective answer. Then we also have Suki, which can also pump up our team, and when our permanents leave the battlefield during our turn, they get replaced by an ally token. We also have the White Lotus Reinforcements, not quite as synergistic with Katara as the Lieutenant, but still a way to pump up our allies. And then we also have Appa as another powerful ally, a 3/4 with flash and flying, so we can play that instant speed and then maybe airbend a whole bunch of our own permanents and then save them from maybe a board wipe. And then whenever we cast a spell from exile, we get to make an extra ally token. So another pretty versatile card that is certainly worth considering. But yeah, for now we'll be running this in best of 1, so let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand is pretty decent. We've got good mana acceleration, card draw, bit of interaction with Aang, and Fabled Passage from our opponent. So yeah, I'll play the ally. Turn 2 most likely still start with a guide, which will free up more mana. It's our opponent to red-green with a new Badger Mole Cub. Drew the Protectors. So yeah, we can double spell a guide into Protectors. And then next turn maybe a Voyager into another creature. Reinforcements can help us draw a card. Now Llanowar Elves also will generate an extra mana with the Cub in play. And there's another one. Alright. That is a lot of mana here. Every one of these lanes taps for 3. And draw another reinforcements. So I can start with Voyager. And then I could play reinforcements now, although it's possible I need to keep up Aang just to airbend some big play from our opponent next turn. Although I think I still go for reinforcements now, so I get to draw, and then I can draw again in the opponent's turn. That seems a little bit better to me. Because I don't necessarily have the tools to go over the top of what my opponent is doing. Secret Tunnel, as a default, is unblockable, so pretty good alongside Earthbending. But yeah, I don't think any of these creatures are necessarily attacking. So 10 mana total here, which is quite impressive. Cub is good in multiples. And there's Boomy. It's gonna Earthbend on another lane. So if this deals damage to us, they get an additional attack step with her lanes. But there's no real mana sink, at least, that I'm aware of. I guess Ba Sing Se can Earthbend 2 on a lane, but only as a sorcery. Alright, Katara's excellent. And Aang. Could even go Katara into another Voyager, and then still keep up Aang. So we have some form of interaction at least. Ooh, a Lieutenant is spicy. Would be nice to hit some more lane drops. So let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana total. Yeah, I could go for another Voyager before we drop the Lieutenants. Gain a million life. Okay, now with the land, I could still play Lieutenant and keep up Aang. And pass a turn. And then with Katara and Aang at instant speed, we'll get to trigger all these Voyagers once again. And then maybe next turn we can set up a powerful attack. And Bitter Work. Whenever you attack a player with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, draw a card. 4 mana to Earthbend 4. That's fine. So we're going to Earthbend on the Secret Tunnel. Anything else? They get to draw. So let's see here, does Boomy trigger? It's only when Boomy himself deals damage. Alright, so I'll just take 5. And then I'm still gonna play Aang, just to help clear a path and get a million triggers. And I can bounce once more, maybe get rid of the tunnel. Alright, our opponent says good game, as we'll get to draw a bunch more cards, and next turn likely present lethal. So it was a scary start with those 2 cubs, but luckily there wasn't a huge curve topper to take over. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our mana is good with double T-Shop. We've got Protectors into a Guide. Hopefully we'll find some of our curve toppers as well. For now, play Protectors. Opponent on a blue deck. Plotting a Slick Shot. Alright, that could be scary. Still gonna play the Great Divide Guide, which will set up more mana for the following turn. So you could technically already play Aang at the crossroads as a flying blocker for the slick shot. Opponent did not cast a slick shot yet. In fact, passes the turn. Well, now we have quite a few options. I can pass with a bunch of flash creatures at the ready, which I don't mind. And then, for now, can go ahead and attack with my Vigilant Protectors. It is tempting to play Katara first, just to get additional triggers of everything entering. Yeah, you know what, let's go Katara, and then pass with reinforcements up. Opponent's gonna abandon attachments, that's fine. Discarding a Wild Ride. So we're likely to see the Firebending student, which pairs well with the Wild Ride. Could have cast reinforcements while our opponent was tapped out to ensure extra triggers. And yeah, there's a student. Firebending X, where X is its power, so very good if you can pump its power and give it haste. But we do have the Protectors to protect Katara if something bad happens. So now we'll get twice the number of tokens, which sets up our Lieutenant beautifully. Alright, so we have a lot of options, can also start playing off the top. But this seems like a situation where I need to get the game over with as opposed to trying to get as much value out of my cards as possible. So I can go for Lieutenant and then keep up Aang. But we'll start here, since this will also trigger twice with Katara. So that's a lot of extra power and toughness. And go to attackers. And then do have to be a little careful that I don't lose the Protector somehow. But yeah, let's attack like so. This technically keeps 3 mana up for Aang. And this can not only airbend creatures, but also spells that are on the stack. Student blocks, we'll see if they have a pump spell here. Octopus form. Alright, so I'll flash in Aang. Get some more counters. Bounce this. Bounce their spell. I guess there's no real upside to airbending the octopus form. Could have just let it fizzle by airbending the student. But I think we'll be fine. Opponent's at 3. I've got a flying blocker for the slick shot. And we can make Aang indestructible with the Protectors too. Alright, there's a slick shot. A Wild Ride is a good starting point. Another one, alright. If they have a fling effect, we could be in trouble. And go to blocks. Block. GG's. Are we dead? Bulk up, double its power, but no trample. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. This hand's a little sketchy, especially with double Verge and no good mana fixing. So I'll take a mulligan. This is better. Relying on the guide to ramp out our more expensive spells. So one card has to go. Probably just Protesters. Keep the cheaper spells. And name ally. Opponent also on an ally deck. So don't expect a lot of removal. So I could go for a guide first. And then maybe Katara before we reinforcements. And yeah, there's May. Can be a nice inclusion if you want to go 5 colors, since the mana base certainly supports it. Although not especially powerful in the mirror match here. So can play Katara and then hit for 2, I guess. Or we can play Hakoda, start playing allies off the top. I think the priority is just making more mana with the reinforcements, which we can get to with Katara. And our opponents got their own. Alright, drawing a land is good. So this turn cycle, we're going for Hakoda plus reinforcements. See what's on top first. Protectors. Yeah, I guess I don't mind playing the Protectors. Although, again, I don't expect a lot of removal. This makes stuff indestructible, doesn't give hexproof, and some of the removal might be Aang to Airbend or other exile effects. So maybe I prefer reinforcements actually, and I'll just main phase this. And pass. And now we can hopefully take over. Opponent's got the Voyager, so that's gonna gain them some life, maybe draw a card. With Katara in play, it will immediately draw a card, of course. And the Lieutenant, that's a good one. Would love to find our own. We've got the wider board, so we can take full advantage. No attacks for now. And another Protectors will immediately play. And there's a Lieutenant, perfect. I guess I'll play another Protectors first. Play Lieutenant. And then Cavern of Souls. Could immediately play Aang to bounce some stuff back and set up an attack. Yeah, that's maybe fine here. Bounce Katara, bounce maybe the Voyager. Sure. And set up an attack. Do we prefer Voyager or May? I think Voyager. And attack. Always have double Protectors. Opponent falls to 6. They will gain some life back here in a second. And then Waterbend 8 isn't happening just yet, but maybe next turn. But yeah, opponent's just too far behind on board, thanks to the acceleration from the guide. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's a little slow to get going. Double Hakoda's nice if the game drags out. Yeah, I'll still try it. And then, for now, I don't think it matters too much. Turn 1 Lunar Elves, always strong. Alright, so we're just gonna play reinforcements end of turn. And then a Mossborn Hydra. We definitely want to airbend at some point. Still gonna play Katara first to try and get additional value from our airbend trigger. And then I may as well attack. Would love to find our Great Divide guide to give us a bit of extra mana. Plays well with Commander. Right, Badger Mole Cub, Earthbends a forest into a 1/1. And a Chocobo's next. Into another Hydra. Alright, that's a lot of stuff. Pretty much have to keep up Aang. Question is, do we main phase it to play around a potential protection spell like Snakeskin Veil? Or do we wait? I think I wait. Could also go Protectors plus Reinforcements this turn. And still take a hit from the Hydras. could be reasonable. Hope they don't go off too much. Alright, let's try it. Bristly Bill, very scary with a Hydra especially. And a fetch lane, so this is gonna hurt. Am I dead yet? Go up to 7 double. And an Explorer can play an extra lane once again. Alright, GG's. Did not work out to tap out here and not keep up Aang. Although what would have happened, I bounce double Hydra, they still build up the mana with Explorer, and then next turn they're probably in a similar spot. Alright, GG's. Don't know if the Cub really contributed too much this game. I guess it made the Elf tap for 2 mana as opposed to 1. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This hand is a little slow, admittedly. Could use extra mana. I don't think this is quite good enough without a third land. This one's better. We've got our Great Divide Guide. What do I get rid of? Could be the Earthen Ally. And then keep the card draw, hopefully. Could also get rid of Aang, and then just go Guide on 2, turn 3 Voyager into Ally to immediately draw a card. Yeah, let's try that instead. And then can play this tapped on, let's say, blue. Turn 1 Elves. And there's Katara. We get to play the Guide. So had I played Ally turn 1, I would have been able to go Katara plus Voyager on turn 3, which would have been better. Opponent with an Earthbender Ascension. So it gets to find a land, turn a land into a creature, and then with enough counters on this, it will also give them +1 counters. So this turn, still leaning Katara. Could play the Ally, since Voyager with Katara in play will trigger twice. So we'll immediately draw a card. And this way we'll have a bit of extra mana, assuming the Guide survives. With the Guide we can also eventually activate the Ally to Earthbend 5. It is quite pricey, admittedly. But still nice to have a mana sink on top of what's already a pretty decent 1-drop in the deck. Not playing any black creatures, but we could, if we included May, for instance. But a 1 mana 4/2 potentially isn't bad. Alright, opponent's got Toph. And we drew another Voyager, so we get to draw some cards here. Alright, another Guide. I guess I'll save that for next turn to draw with Voyager once again. And then for now pass a turn. This is also a lot of life gain, so we can take a hit or 2. Alright, Firebending Lesson kicked, takes out Katara. So that's too bad. Don't have a way to protect it this time. and another Voyager. Alright, don't mind if I do. And then now I can still play Hakoda. See another Katara on top. So we're in good shape here. Ascension up to 3 counters. So with 4 counters it will be active. And we see Boomy. One of the payoffs for the Earthbend deck. Yeah, under the right board state, getting an extra attack step can be very powerful. But I'm not too worried. So we'll start with Katara, and then the Lieutenant's gonna trigger twice as well. There's another Lieutenant. Alright, now I feel bad for my opponent. Play another one. And we can probably just attack. GG's. And that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's a little slow to get going, admittedly. Could use a good 3-drop. Divine Guide as usual. But I'll try it. Start with a tapped passage. Turn to Voyager. And there's a guide. Yeah, I guess I'll play the guide now, so we can already play our 4-drop on 3. This card's been very impressive in this deck. Opponent main phasing reinforcements. So now I can go Voyager into reinforcements if I'd like, or I can go for a Protesters first, so all my creatures have haste, which is pretty good with the guide. So let's do that instead. And then the engine of Guide, Protesters, and Hakoda especially is very nice. Alright, opponent's gonna shelter, exiling the Guide, so that's too bad. Although we draw another one. So what's the ideal sequence now? Guide has haste, so can immediately tap for mana. This can also tap for mana. Then I can still play Voyager and play reinforcements. That seems decent. I guess I could have even gone Voyager first. So I guess I'll main phase this and see what we draw off Voyager. Five mana Aang. So these can all attack. Or maybe I'll leave one creature's back to block the lifelinker. And then Aang's not bad here. Yeah, I wasn't sure if the Protesters would be worth it, but after seeing this game, I'm kind of impressed. Opponents got their own guides and another Sheltered by Ghosts, once again exiling the guide so they know how good it is. Lieutenants. So I wouldn't be able to draw a Voyager this turn, so may as well go for Hakoda. And then how does an all-out attack look like? Probably don't want to send in the 2/2s, but the rest could attack. I would love to get my guide back, but opponent's gonna take it, fall to 1. Alright, pass a turn. We know lines coming up for Aang or for lieutenants. Opponent's got Katara. Can they stabilize? They still have a bunch of mana left. One card in hand. Doesn't look like it. Could play Protectors off the top. Yeah, honestly, I think just going Protectors and maybe into Lieutenant is going to be better. Although Aang with haste, I guess, also could have flown over for the win. But I think we'll get there no matter what. Alright, opponent's got Aang to airbend the Protesters, so we lose haste, and Hakoda, thanks to Katara, bouncing 2 things. Fair enough. We'll let that happen. Still get to draw. And then, yeah, I get to still cast one of these. So may as well go for haste. And then an all-out attack should be plenty. GG's. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. A guide for mana. Could use some source of card advantage. Opponent on maybe a landfall deck with escape tunnel. Alright, don't need more lanes. Another fetch land. So our opponent might be earthbending in the future. Gets a mountain. And there's Toph, the blind bandit, lets them earthbend too. And a Voyager's not bad either. So I can go Voyager into reinforcements, for instance. And immediately draw a card. Could also play another guide first. That way I ensure that Voyager will keep drawing next turn as well. And then it's not too bad if a Great Divide guide gets answered. And these all have flash, so that maybe gives us more options at instant speed. Bristly Bill now. Into another fetch land. So Toph also scales with a number of +1 counters on lanes. A double block on Toph is not unreasonable, or on the land in fact. They get to take out a Voyager maybe. Could hang on to the Voyager. I guess if we trade for the land it comes back, triggering Bristly Bill once again. Yeah, you know what, let's just take 8. I'll be able to gain more life to make up for it. And Lieutenant's not bad either. So, what's my best play here? I have 7 mana, so I can play all 3 spells here. Although if we want to get the most out of Voyager, I would have to play 2 creatures now and then 2 in the opponent's turn. Ideally, Lieutenant is the last creature we play, so that doesn't quite work out. But, yeah, maybe I start with reinforcements, see what's up. Draw another one, okay. So then now, I maybe just pass with reinforcements and Aang, and then next turn Lieutenant. That way I can also maybe airbend an opposing spell or a creature. Airbending the land will essentially reset it. Now Boomy unleashed. Yeah, that seems like a good tempo play to airbend it for now. See if they want to attack. Do we want to block? Yeah, double blocking with a guide or guide plus Ang is reasonable. They probably have another copy in hand, but that's fine. And then I'll play another reinforcements, which will gain 2, draw a card. Now they can play Boomy for just 2 mana next turn, so we didn't straight up counter it. And our opponent prioritizes Ang. Another Voyager's decent. Alright, so it's probably a turn where we want to deploy the Lieutenant, so I can go Voyager into Lieutenant. Also reasonable to play my Commander, see what's on top. But I'll get to draw a bunch of cards here. So I think I prefer keeping Ang available. Alright, so what if I play the ally? Can gear up for an attack. At 25, that seems safe enough. Although we do have to be careful here with those extra attack steps. It's only when Boomy deals damage. So, yeah, should be safe enough to attack. Bill's trumping. Possible there's a board wiping coming, in which case maybe the commander could have saved my team. Right, just tough. Into a fetch land. And now Boomy. Earthbend 4. Still doesn't untap the land in question. So our opponent seems pretty dead here on the way back. Can't see what's on top. Just a land. Although I could draw into it with the protectors. And then still maybe cast more spells, but yeah, an all-out attack should be plenty. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. We've got a curve, that's for sure. This might grow up to 4 power this game. Opponent red-white with a surveil land. So it could be something a bit more controlling, which is always concerning when you're playing a creature deck. I think I start with Voyager, so we can next turn play Katara, immediately draw a card. There's likely some interaction afoot. So do I play Katara or not? I think I still do, before attacking to pump the ally. And they can maybe take out a Voyager instead, we'll see. Alright, Lightning Helix. So I don't get to draw, but I get to hit for 3. Now Hedge Maze, so this at least 4 colors. Did not draw the land for Protesters. So then I guess we're leaning Protectors into Reinforcements. And then next turn Lieutenant is going to hit incredibly hard. If they try and take out Katara in response, I can still flash in Reinforcements to get an extra token. But now Lieutenant is not quite as exciting. So yeah, control deck with double Lightning Helix early on. Definitely stymieing some of the initial punch that our deck has to offer. Now 4 mana. Could see all sorts of flash creatures, but I'll just play a Lieutenant and see what happens. And do I attack all out? So what colors does my opponent have? No double white. So that eliminates some options. Yeah, trying to think what they could be keeping up here. There might be some new cards I'm not familiar with yet. Alright, the Librarian. X equals 2. So that's a 3/3 blocker. Block protectors. Can sack it, doesn't really matter. Librarian attacks. Is there a sweeper, maybe? Yep. Alright, that's rough. If we can draw an untapped land for protesters, I guess all my lands are untapped. We can maybe put them to 4. Never mind, opponent was able to wipe the board for 2 even. So still has a Librarian on defense. But I do get to play the protesters at least. Which also pumps the ally. Actually debating whether or not I should attack, because I do have Lieutenant coming up. So maybe it's not worth it. Opponent falls to 4. Now Cornucopia makes sense in a multicolored control deck. And a Frostcliff Siege. Can give creatures haste. Or can draw extra cards. Take 4. Alright, so Voyager into Lieutenant should do it. So yeah, the red splash against control certainly has its moments. Being able to give the team haste. So we still got there in the end. So yeah, we had some close games, some mirror matches as well. But overall, quite impressed by this multicolor ally deck. There's a few ways we can configure it, but I think we kind of determined some of the key pieces. The Divide Guide to give us extra mana, the Voyager to help us draw more cards, gain some life, Katara to double our triggers, and then ideally some curve toppers to help take over the late game, and of course Lieutenant to pump up the team. So those were all key pieces of the deck. So yeah. Pretty happy with how it performed. We'll have to wait and see what impact this archetype will have in the actual ranked standard, because of course playing in the preview event is always a little bit different. You're going to see more of the new cards and fewer of the classic staples that you're used to seeing in standard. Don't know if this is going to match up particularly well against the Reanimator decks with a bunch of board wipes basically built into their game plan, but there are some graveyard hate options as well if we're willing to splash a bit of black, so we can always fine-tune the deck to have a slightly better matchup against certain archetypes. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.